My name is Mark Greene, and this is my road story. I've learned an amazing amount of information from the 1,000+ people I've talked to. And the main thing I've learned is if you're passionate about something, go figure out a way to have a career around it, because your life will be enhanced in so many ways that you never imagined. Don't live for retiring and doing what you want to do later in life, because there may not be a later in life. And be grateful for what you have.
The podcast itself is all about the story. I want to know your origins, where you've been, where you're going. Obviously, you didn't do Cars Yeah for the entirety of your career, I assume.
Correct.
All right. Yeah, I did some research on you, and I was actually kind of surprised to find out who you actually were, because technically I'm a really big fan. But before we get to that, give us a little bit of an introduction as to, where you come from and, kind of what you're doing currently.
All right. Well, I grew up in Southern California in a community just north of San Diego called La Jolla, which was an idyllic place to grow up. We were close to the ocean, so I spent a lot of time at the beach surfing and body surfing, hanging out with my friends. I was a typical Southern California kid with a Schwinn Stingray and having fun and enjoying life, skateboarding. And I went to college, UCSD and San Diego State. I studied graphic design and advertising as well as business. Ended up graduating, and I got a job for the first 11 years of my life with a company called Warner Design, where I was a creative person. First, I guess you could say a production person. Then I became a creative director. One day I asked my boss, how can I make more money? And he said, well, bring in some work. So a couple days a week, I'd put a suit on and go downtown. This was before cell phones, and knock on doors and try to bring work into our business. So I got to learn about sales and communications with customers and things like that. And one of the accounts I landed was a startup business. It was a catalog business. Again, this is pre-internet, called Griot's Garage. Mm-hmm. And being a car guy, I came home that day, and guess what? There was a catalog on my desk, and my wife said, wow, this is a company you should go get some business from. You could do a better job designing this catalog for them. And lo and behold, I went up and met with Richard Griot, and we landed the account. We started designing and producing his catalog. Well, that led to a friendship, and then that led to me leaving Warner and joining up with this little startup company which was moving from sunny San Diego, where I was living and enjoyed, up to the Pacific Northwest, where it rained every day. And I came up here screaming and crying and had to sell my 84 Porsche Cabriolet because it wasn't so good in the wet weather. Buy a coupe. And tell you though, I never looked back. It was a wonderful ride. I was with the company for more than 20 years, and my responsibilities there were quite vast. I did everything from being in charge of building the brand to selecting merchandise. I did everything from photography to writing copy, designing products, traveled the world looking for cool products, did a lot of cool car things. I raced vintage cars for 12 years while I was there, which was really, really fun. And I was really proud of what I helped build. Richard bought a old dilapidated Coca-Cola bottling building and let me design that building into our corporate headquarters. It was a really fun ride. I had a really great time. And I'll tell you what was interesting about it was it got me back into car care. When I was 14 years old, I started my own detailing business, and I did that all the way through college. It helped pay for my college education. It helped my wife and I, of which I've been married to Jill now for 34 years, save up for our first home. And the fact that I got into car care, and I was actually developing car care products at Griot's and coming up with that line of products that we sold, and I was very proud of the work that we did there because I really thought they were the best products at the time. And it's been a really fun ride, and that kind of brings us up to the last 4 years of my life, which involved a radical change, which we can get into, of leaving Griot's and trying to find a new way for myself in life, and then starting this podcast called Cars Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and dive right into that. So you leave Griot, which is a great company. I have the Orbital from them.
Cool.
And I've bought products. And actually, I brought products, and I remember Griot. This is obviously something that's completely out of the ordinary for our younger listeners. But I used to get magazines like Car and Driver, Road and Track.
I still do.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. And I really kind of thought about it to myself. And I was like, I really should, because they were so much fun.
Yeah.
With Griot, I just remember flipping through the pages and seeing that advertisement there, that iconic little, that Roadster.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me the story of the Roadster with Griot.
There's a big argument about that, because when I joined Griot, the logo had already been designed, much to my frustration, because I love design and I love designing logos for people. But it already existed. The market, the brand had started. So I thought, well, it's okay for what we're doing. It has a kind of a classic look and feel. And of course, my whole job was building that brand, really creating a brand around great products. So I asked Richard one day, what's with the Jaguar? And he said, what Jaguar? I said, well, on the logo, that's not a Jaguar. I said, yeah, it is. That's like a 120 or a 140. Yeah, it's a Jaguar. No, it's not. And we had a running argument for years, decades, that was a Jaguar, and he claimed it wasn't. So the original designer of the logo, I never met. I have no idea where his inspiration came from, but I stand by my claim. I think he looked at an old Jaguar and used the profile, because everything, even down to the little lights, it all works. But that's neither here nor there. The whole concept, of course, was to provide products for people to have fun in their garage. That was the mantra back then. So that's a little quick story about the logo, the swoopy car on the logo.
I always find it interesting to find out how things came to fruition, you know, especially in a company, and especially when you come in, and I'm looking at your I was going to say IMDb. I don't know if you have one, but I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at your LinkedIn, rather.
Yes.
So I'm looking at that, and you have a lot of VP positions. I mean, you've got VP marketing, VP merchandising, creative branding. I mean, that's a lot of different hats that you wore.
Yep.
And, you kind of have to, in my opinion, because, I come from a business background as well. I've got my graduate degree, my MBA, and there's always this kind of, topic of discussion as to being invested and being just an employee. And it almost sounds like, when you have so many different positions, when you grow with the company for as long as you did, it sounds like you were very much invested in what they were doing. Is that true?
Oh, sure. My father taught me a lesson long time ago. My father grew up in Texas, a farmer, a rancher. He was one of 5 kids that left and went out west and started an architectural firm. He got a degree in engineering architecture in Oklahoma, married my mom. They met there, came out west, and he was an architect. And he told me from a very young age, he said, whatever you do, Mark, there's a couple things that will inspire success, not only for yourself, but for the people that you work for, whether they're an employer or they are a client. He said, wherever you work, treat it like it's yours. Treat it like you own it. Do what the owner would do. If that means emptying the trash can in the bathroom because you're proud of your place of business and you want it to be clean, do it. If it means coming in before the boss gets there and staying until the boss leaves, do it. If it means acting like the business owner in the way you treat the people that work there, your coworkers or your clients, do it. And the other thing he taught me was, if you're not as smart as the next guy, you can always outwork him. So he said, just work your tail off. And I think that farm mentality, because you never stop working when you're on a farm. You can't.
Sure.
You've got live animals. They don't take vacations. The cows don't go away for 2 weeks to Hawaii and give you a break. They're always there. They always need help. So those are some great things that my dad instilled in me. Just a hard work ethic. The guy worked so hard his entire life. Sadly, I lost him last summer. And I just think back to the great lessons that he taught me. And those 2 lessons really have carried me through in many ways. And also a great lesson my mom taught me, and that was being grateful, having an attitude of gratitude for everything that is in front of you, no matter how small. Respect it and appreciate the fact that you have that, whether it's a meal or something you worked hard for or something that somebody gave you.
let's talk a little bit about your journey at Griot. It's very difficult to start a brand, and it's exponentially more difficult to actually build the brand and make it into something substantial. So you guys were able to transition from just being in the back of magazines to becoming a really highly respected detailing company or a car care company. How were you able to build a brand like that? I'm waiting for a great answer just because you've had so many different positions within that brand. So can you tell me a little bit about the journey of like, where did you start when you came in? How was the company when you came in? And what did you guys do to make it what it is, or what it's going to be in the future as well?
It's a long story, but I'll try to consolidate it for the listeners so that it doesn't get too boring. Yes, wearing a lot of hats. I have a saying, and that is the reason I have no hair left on my head is because I wore far too many hats at Griot's Garage. I rubbed all my hair off. When I joined the company, there was really only 3 people there and a guy that would stop by at the end of the school day and pack up the orders. It was very small, bootstrapped kind of thing, and it was a catalog business. No internet at the time. No, barely cell phones were coming along. So this is a while back for those younger listeners going, heaven forbid, you had no cell phones, no internet. So I came on board because I came from a design background and I was already designing the Griot's Garage catalog. And so I already had an idea of the look, feel. I had improved it, I felt like. In fact, that's why we landed the account. We had we being Warner designed one of the first Macintosh computers, an SE back in the day, that we could show our clients that we could work faster, better, cheaper with this new computer thing that we were designing books on. But I came in and I was tasked with being responsible for building the brand. And that meant the look, the feel, the imagery, the products that we sold. And so quite quickly, I treated it, and I did have some stock in the business, as my own business. I just acted like this was Greene's garage. I'm going to treat it that way. Of course, I respected Richard for what he was doing and the investment he was making in the business, of course, in the partnership and collaboration that we had. But my job was to basically work in the background, behind the doors, and create and bring Richard forward as the expert in the industry. And he was a hands-on guy. He did actually detail his cars. He did do things. He worked very hard at the time. And so I kind of became Richard in a sense because I wrote all the copy. I was into doing the photography, art direction, designing everything from the custom bottles to selecting the sprayers to traveling the world to look for cool products. It doesn't come overnight. It was a long, steady grind of consistency and really knowing what it is, I should say who it was that we were selling to, defining it. Because from the very beginning, we decided we were not going to compete at the bottom, because I've always said the race to the bottom is a race down the toilet, unless you're selling large volumes like a Amazon or Walmart or something where you can do that. But we wanted to be a boutique that was selling the best of the best, professional level products that were not easily attainable in just regular stores, especially the big box stores where you'd walk in and see a field of brands like Meguiar's or other car care products. And you'd stand there and kind of think, well, okay, if I'm a cheap Charlie, I'll buy the cheapest. If I'm a middle-range guy, I'll spend a little more. And if I am a guy that doesn't care what things cost and I want the best, I'll pick the thing that's the most expensive. Kind of like the way I buy wine. Not being a connoisseur, because I really don't drink much anyway, so it doesn't matter. So that was the long, slow slug, and it was. I mean, I was there for 20 plus years, physically in my seat there for 20 plus years, and then technically from the beginning. So the company, when I left, was 23 years old. So I was really there for that amount of time. There's no magic to it other than consistency, identifying who the target is, and you just keep doing it. We are producing 17 to 20 catalogs a year, printing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of books, mailing them, and trying to stay a step ahead, but doing it very differently, because car care was not sold in a catalog back then. it was only available in stores. In fact, I'm almost certain we were one of the first, if not the first companies to sell car care through a catalog where people would have to wait for the product to arrive. There was no 2-day Amazon Prime. Everything was a week. We were in the Pacific Northwest. Our Florida customers would have to wait 10 days sometimes for a truck to go across the country because a lot of our products couldn't ship air because they were deemed, hazardous materials, even though I'd question the question to try to set any of them on fire, but that's regardless. So, things were very different back then. So we approached it from a whole different standpoint that this is a high end, this is worth the wait. And everything that I wrote like I was Richard. I had to pretend I was him, is all first person, and work from that way. But that's the very brief answer to your question, which involves a lot more complexity. But it's like any business. You identify your avatar, you identify who you are and who you are to your customer, and you stay consistent with that. You just stick to it. You don't chase shiny objects. You don't keep diverting. You just stay consistent. And that's what we did. We identified that our slogan was have fun in your garage, and that was why people were buying, because we were providing them with the ability to have fun in your garage. And that slogan appeared everywhere. I had to train call center staff to say that at the end of every call. It was printed on everything. It was on every salutation that left that building. It's just a consistency. It's just a consistency and a long grinding slug.
Was it easier for you to transition into this brand because it was a car brand, because you had a history of cars, or was that kind of your first taste of the automotive world?
Oh, no. I've been a car nut since I was born. Just ask my mom. I had a Garten Cadillac when I was 1 year old. In fact, I've got a picture of it. I'll send it to you someday. I even had a little hair on my head at that time that was blowing in the wind.
I know the feeling, trust me.
I was failing so fast. So, no, I've been a car guy forever. I grew up a car guy. Southern California was an easy place to be a car guy, even though I was very much an outdoor person, skateboarder, bicycle, rode motorcycles, dirt bikes, but I love surfing. But cars, that was it for me. And I was very fortunate to live in La Jolla, where there were some people with some wealth who had nice cars. I would go over to their houses, and the first thing I would do is, what kind of cars your dad have? Go down there and, oh my gosh, he's got a Lamborghini? A Miura? Seriously?
Well, that's not a bad one to start with.
Yeah, or Porsches or whatever. In fact, there was even a time in high school that I really wanted to date this gal. Finally got a date with her. She had a birthday party at her house. I went over there, and of course I had to go peek in the garage, and there was a Porsche Speedster out there, and her dad was out there cleaning it. So I went out and started talking. He was preparing it for actually a Porsche parade that was taking place in San Diego. I ended up spending the whole night in the garage helping him detail his car. Needless to say, that young woman didn't go out with me again. She was a little perturbed that I paid more attention to her father and his car than to her birthday.
I was going to ask if you actually ended up marrying that young lady, because it looks like you had a good asset on your side.
That did not happen. I would have wished, just because I could have gotten to their dad's car. But I've loved cars forever, and they've always been a part of my life. The first cool car that I had was my second car, and it was a 67 Carmen Ghia that I found in Point Loma, which is a part of San Diego. And I'd not driven a stick shift car. I'd driven motorcycles, so I knew how clutches and throttles worked, but I'd never driven a stick shift car. And my mom helped me buy that car, and she drove me over there, and I drove it, and we bought it, and she said, okay, follow me home. And I said, I've never driven a stick shift. How do I do this? And I remember she said, don't worry, you'll figure it out. And she left. And so it's about a 30-minute drive back to La Jolla with a lot of stoplights. And I have to say, I probably got honked at about 100 times and stalled out a bunch of times. But by the time I got home, I had it figured out.
Yeah, that's always a good experience. That's one that you don't forget.
No.
Is learning how to drive stick shift. That's usually something that you could kind of trace back. I know I can remember my very first day, and then being on an on-ramp of a freeway with my father next to me. So I started rolling back, and the panic of someone who doesn't know how to drive stick shift is, oh God, I'm rolling back, I'm going backwards. But yeah, I mean, that's something that you don't forget is learning how to drive stick shift. Yeah. So let's talk about the transition of kind of Griot, and I hate to kind of go back to Griot all the time, but I just think that's a really important thing, because it's a brand that hasn't existed for long. which I just realized. I thought the Griots has been around for so much longer. Just, it's very strange. You know, it had some integrity kind of oozing through the magazine somehow.
Well, thank you. That was the goal.
Yeah, you guys definitely achieved it. So building something like that from the ground up, and that's essentially what you did. I mean, obviously it wasn't just you, but you were a part of that team, and then having to leave that. Now, I don't know if this is a sore subject, if we could talk about it, if we don't need to. Can we go through with, you know, kind of you leaving Griots and then starting Cars Yeah?
Well, sure. You know, as time goes by, things change. And there's a great book that I always refer to people. In fact, I bought copies for my kids when they were transitioning into junior high and then from high school to college. And it's called Who Moved My Cheese? And
I know that book.
Yeah. So if anybody knows that book, they'll understand the meaning. If you don't know the book, go buy it. It's a really quick read. You can read it in an evening. It's a wonderful book about the fact that things can and will change. And if you don't change with them, you might not find your cheese where it used to be. And so I always say that somebody move my cheese, I guess, at Griots. Things were changing there. The plans that we had made together, Richard and I, of where the business was going to go and what we're going to do with it, he was changing that. And so it wasn't a place that I should stay anymore. And so very, very tough time in my life because I really thought I would end my days there. That was a plan, that we'd build the business up, sell it. I'd retire, go do whatever I want to do, maybe start my own business, whatever. Because the idea of retirement seems kind of foreign to me. I don't sit around well, as my wife says. I just don't like to sit around. I like to create things and do things. So I made that difficult decision to leave. Now, at the same time, there was a lot of turmoil going on in my life. My father, who was 80 at the time, had fallen off a deck he was building on a hillside and broke his neck. And the doctor who called me the morning that I found out about this said, I'm your doctor surgeon. We don't even know how your father's walking, much less alive. He's got a C2 break, that is the Christopher Reeve break, we call it. He should be paralyzed.
Oh, wow.
And so he went through a huge transition. And at the same time, my mother-in-law got cancer. So that was traumatic. And then after both of them recovered somewhat, my wife was diagnosed with a serious tumor in her body. And that was like, what? I mean, why do all these things keep happening to me? And so I decided to stay home for a while and care for her because she had a long recovery. She couldn't walk for a long time, couldn't even get out of bed to use the bathroom. And so I became kind of the at-home mom that she had been for so many years, raising our kids. I have two children I'm very proud of, Paige and Blake. Paige had already graduated from college and was off living in Scottsdale, Arizona, working in her career. My son was just finishing his first year in college, going to school back east at RISD. So I had a very expensive college tuition to pay every year. And on top of that, medical bills that were piling up all over the place. And on top of that, what am I going to do with my life? I mean, I was really in a very weird place, a place I'd never been. I've worked since I was 9 years old, never not worked, always earned enough to live comfortably and save and do all the things you're supposed to do. And all of a sudden, the bank account sitting there and there's nothing going in it. And so taking this time off with my wife being home, my son came home from college and we were going for a walk. And usually the son looks to the father and says, what should I do with my life, Dad? Well, in this case, I looked down at my son and said, I looked up. He's a little taller than me. If he's listening, he's rolling his eyes right now. Come on, Dad, tell the truth. And so I looked up to my son and I said, Blake, what am I going to do? I'm really too young to retire. I don't want to retire. And you know me, I don't sit around well. I want to do something with my life. And he said, Dad, you've been taking me to car shows. Pebble Beach. My son had been to Pebble Beach like 12 times. He'd been on my pit crew when I was racing vintage cars. So he'd been to many races. I'd taken him to many car events. We'd gone on tours together in some old Porsches we had. And he said, Dad, what do I tease you about? You can't walk by somebody without stopping, asking them about their car and about their business. And I said, fair enough. Yeah, I do that. He said, what if you did that? And I said, what do you mean? How do you make money going to car shows and vintage races and talking to people? And he said, have you ever heard of a thing called a podcast? And I said, a pod what? He said, a podcast. Come on, get with it, Dad. And so at that moment when you feel like an old fogey and you go, well, tell me about this podcast thing.
Sure.
And he said, well, I listen to them when I'm in class, not in class, but in studio, I should say, in studio. I'll say he graduated very high GPA from a very difficult school. And he said, they're really great. There's all sorts of genres, all sorts of people, all sorts of things, interviews, stories, whatever you want. Find them on iTunes. There's thousands of them. Here's a couple I listen to. Why don't you listen to them? So I started listening to them. And as I combined the podcast concept with what he suggested and with my passion for cars and learning about people and their businesses, it all started to kind of gel. So me and my usual process, I sat down and wrote a business plan. I mean, a very intricate business plan. And then I came up with some names and started designing a logo, and then started to design my website, built my website, which I'd never done. I watched a lot of YouTube tutorials late into the night. And Cars Yeah became this thing, and that's where it came from. It was literally a walk with my son, asking him, what should I do with my life? Wow, be careful what you ask for, right?
One of the biggest challenges that I have with this show is bringing on interesting people like you. It's almost like a full-time job to schedule people and do the research and actually bring on people that are going to be interesting and fun to talk to. Now, you, my friend, are a machine. You have well over 1,000 people. How do you do that?
Yes, I guess that's a nice way to put it, and I appreciate that. Well, I'll let your listeners know that Michael is going to be a future guest on my Cars Yeah podcast. I'm not sure when this podcast is airing, but Michael's is going to air on May 23rd. He's my 1,037th guest in less than 4 years. So that gives you a little bit of a concept of the process I built here. How did I do this? Well, first of all, I decided I wanted to do 5 shows a week. And when I told friends that I shared with a very tight group of my close friends and family what I was doing, almost every one of them said, "Are you sure about that? That's a lot of shows to produce, and you've never even done this before. Plus, aren't you going to run out of people eventually? I mean, how are you going to do this?" So I thought, well, I'll never run out of people. I don't believe that. There's too many people in the automotive industry. But doing 5 shows a week, I guess the answer to your question was I set a very high bar for myself. And that's something else that my father always taught me was set the bar just a little higher than you think you can get. Just a little bit higher. And I learned a little bit of that from Tony Robbins. Tony was a client of mine, actually, when he was just starting. I met him on a beach one morning when I was coming out of the ocean after an early morning dawn patrol surf session. He was running down the beach, and I just listened to his series of personal power on cassette tapes. Another thing, those young folks will not know what a cassette tape is, but and I said, "Tony, I just got through listening to your tapes." And he stopped and we started talking, and lo and behold, I landed him as a client and we started doing marketing for him. Interesting guy, incredible person. And that was something that I learned when I went through his 3-day firewalk presentation, because he asked me to do that, so I got a real flavor of what he was doing as we designed his marketing materials. And that was one of the things he would do even in his sessions. He would have you go up against a wall and raise your hands, and then raise them a little higher, and then raise them a little higher. And it was really a metaphor, because we all know when you start stretching, your muscles stretch and you can go a little bit further each time. Sure. But when you're doing it, you think, oh, that's the highest I can reach. And then you stretch a little more and you can reach a little higher. So for me with my podcast, I said, I'm going to I don't want to do 7 because I need a little bit of a break just to kind of catch up. But
right.
5, and this is business oriented. Cars Yeah is all about my mantra, which is inspiring automotive enthusiasts. And the concept there is sharing people who figured out how to wrap their passion for cars and motorcycles and trucks into their business and their life. And business is a key part. I love entrepreneurship. Like I said, at Griot's and even at Warner Design, I treated those companies like I owned them. I acted very entrepreneurial. There was no such thing as go home at 5. I asked my wife, because I rarely made it home for dinner. And I worked weekends all the time, traveled all the time. I just decided that's the way it was going to be. And I was okay with that because I was actually having a really fun time. So I decided to do it, and I decided to start my business, Cars Yeah, on May 28th 1 year after I had left Griot's, because I wanted to change the meaning of that date in my life, because it was a difficult decision to leave and to abandon all that and move into another direction. So I was about 2 weeks away from launch. I did a soft launch. I put it out there. I did 2 Facebook pages, Mark Greene Cars. Yeah, I did Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the stuff you do, LinkedIn, changed all that, started notifying all the people I knew. I had a pretty good Rolodex, another old term, of people that I knew. So I was letting them know what was coming. So I did this soft launch without any shows. And as 2 weeks away from go live, I didn't have any shows. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do if the day I go live?
Sure.
There's no cars. Yeah. Well, I just got on the phone. I mean, I went back to those days at Warner Design when I would try to sell. I started dialing for dollars, as I used to say, or dialing for shows. And I just started calling everybody I knew and just said, would you please be a guest on my show? And I had a lot of people say yes, but they were a little timid because they're like, what is this? They didn't even know what a podcast was. Are you going to interview me? I might sound stupid. I don't know if I want to do that or not. And about a week out, my phone rings, and it's the PR gal, Cindy Meidel, who works in the automotive PR industry. She said, Mark. And I knew her from before a little bit. And she said, hey, I see this new thing you're doing. I hadn't even told her about it. She just found my website online. And she said, what's with the show with no guests? And I said, well, I'm working on that. I said, do you know anybody? And she said, yes, actually, one of my clients, Rick Cole, who is the guy who brought the first auction to the Pebble Beach Car Week way back when, is going to bring back an auction to Pebble Beach. How about if he is your first guest? And I went, bless you, my child. Thank you. Thank you. I said, yes. How soon can we do it? And she said, well, tomorrow he's leaving for Europe and he won't be back for 2 weeks. And I go, well, then we got to do it today. And she goes, well, I don't know if I can arrange for that. And I said, we got to do it before he leaves. I'm going to have somebody as my first, and they're not going to, I can't wait for 2 weeks. So he actually called me from the airport, and we did a show. In the background, every once in a while, this is gate number 5, calling gate number 5, flight number effects. 70. Oh gosh. Yeah. It was terrible. It was so hard to edit that show, but I did it. And that was the first. So once I got that one in the can, as you say, then I could call back and say, look, I already got the first one done. I need another one. And it's really just, like I said before, it's just a long, slow slug grind. I mean, you just get up every morning and do it. And I was up at 5:30 every morning. I was working by 6, and I would work till midnight, 7 days a week. I mean, again, my wife was home. I was caring for her. We had a little system where she would ping me on my cell phone. I need some water. Could you take me to the bathroom? I might need a shower today. So I'd stop and go back and lift her up and carry her wherever she needed and make her dinner. And you can ask her. I mean, many nights I'd worked all night long just trying to get this thing going. But I'm proud to say that I somehow pulled it off, and somehow is really just a silly term for I worked my ass off for a long time. And I only, in all these shows, I've only missed one show, and that was the day my dad passed away.
Wow.
And it taught me a valuable lesson that I didn't have enough cushion into my path, my funnel, as you call it, so that I could take some days off. And so I reran Jonathan Ward, who's been a guest on your show, great guy. I reran the show I did with him. And, but other than that, that's how you made it happen. You just work really hard. It sounds simple, but a lot of people aren't willing to sacrifice other things in their lives. They just aren't willing to do it. They'd rather watch TV or go to a game or go out with a party or whatever. No one knew where I was. I was locked in my house. Luckily, it was in my house because I could, lay down and sleep for 2 hours, then get up and work some more. But yeah, you just work really hard. But once you get a system going, it started to kind of work and flow. And now I've got about a month's worth of shows already in the can.
Wow.
So I've got a little cushion in case I have something happen in my life or something, or I need to take a day off or two or go to an event, which I try to do as many events as I can. I wish I could do them all because there's some cool events around the world for cars.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's definitely no shortage of great events for cars.
Oh, no, it's never ending.
You asked me a question, the one that got away in your podcast, and that kind of struck a chord with me. It's always interesting to find out the one that got away, but no one ever asks the ones that you forgot. So I kind of want to turn that around, and maybe we want to talk about some of the clunkers or something that you weren't super stoked on driving. Karmann Ghia is awesome, but I'm sure that there were a couple of cars. I know for me there were a couple of cars that I've purchased, and I'm thinking here, like as I'm sitting right now, what was I thinking? Why would I ever make that purchase decision? So anything that happened to you that was kind of the same case as mine here?
Nope.
Never. You've never had buyer's remorse?
No, honestly, I haven't. I'll tell you why. I guess if I had to pick one that wasn't as great, it would be my first car, but there was something special about that car. It was a 67 Chevy Nova. And if anybody who knows me probably goes, you had a American car? Mark Greene? I've always had German cars. But my neighbor up the street, Mike Brown, owned City Chevrolet. Actually, I think he might have been the general manager at the time. I think he eventually owned it in San Diego, down in Mission Bay. And he was such a great guy. I was friends with his 3 kids. I would hang out at their house all the time. His wife Mary Jo, would invite me to stay and have dinner all the time. And it was just, great old school Southern California neighbors. We played football in the front yard, or on the street actually, and ride bikes and stuff. And he, in fact, let me drive my first Porsche 911. He got a trade-in, a 71 911T. It was sepia brown. I still remember it. He brought it home one night and said, "Hey, Mark, I know you love Porsches. You want to take this for a drive?" I didn't even have my license yet. He let me drive it around.
Very nice of him.
But when I was about to turn 16, he called my parents and said, "Hey, I know Mark's about to turn 16. Are you going to buy him a car?" And my dad said, "Well, we made him a deal. We would match whatever funds he could come up with." And so Mike said, "I've got a car in trade that I think is a perfect first car." So he told me about it. We went down to City Chevrolet. And of course, I'm thinking Chevy. So I'm thinking Camaro, Corvette, what's this going to be? And he takes us in the back lot, way in the back lot. And we walk up to this little turquoise 4-door, 4-cylinder Chevy Nova that still had the plastic bumpy seat covers on it. Literally a little old lady car with 20-something thousand miles. I mean, it was perfect. The car was in perfect shape, but it was just, I was trying to be polite and not show my disappointment.
Sure.
But it was not what I envisioned for my first car. But of course, he sold it to us for $600. So I was sitting there going, okay, I can either look a gift horse in the mouth and be rude and walk away, or go, $600, I got a car.
Yeah.
And a reliable car. He goes, "We just put new tires on it. We just put a new battery in it for you. I got it tuned up, and you can drive it home tonight." And so I did. So I guess it's a long-winded answer to the one car, but no, I tell you, I've been really careful about what I buy when it comes to cars. And careful meaning, I should say the word thoughtful. I've been very forthright, thorough in my investigations, my search. I've never bought a car on a whim. I've really thought it through, decided that is exactly what I wanted, and seeked out that car. And so, no, I've been very fortunate. And for the collector cars I've owned, I've done extremely well with reselling them for far above what I paid for them. Wow. And getting a lot of time in the driver's seat. So I don't think it's because I'm smart or anything. I think it's just because I don't buy things on a whim. I really think it through. In fact, sometimes it's probably caused me to miss a car or two. There's a 73 RS Carrera that I had a chance to buy. Wow. I still feel sick in my stomach about not buying that one. But, it wasn't the right time to be spending the kind of money they wanted for that car at the time. But in hindsight, of course, it would have been the best investment I ever made. But you never know that. So, no, but I've had so many cool cars. I mean, really neat cars. And I did have one other American car after that Nova. I bought from a friend a clone of a 66 GT350 Shelby Mustang.
Okay.
That he and his father had built to exacting standards. I mean, this car was so good that I took it to a Mustang show and won first place in the GT350
Oh, no
class.
kidding. That's hilarious.
I ended up giving the trophy to the second place guy because I thought it wasn't fair that I won that class with a car that was a fake. Nobody could believe it was a fake.
That's incredible.
But it even had a proper VIN tag on it. I mean, these guys had done a really, really thorough job. And I drove that car for 2 years up here in the Northwest in the rain. Scary as hell in the rain that car was. But it was a wonderful car, a lot of fun. But like so many of my cars, somebody came along, saw it, and paid me way more than it was worth because they had to have it. And so I let it go.
You were generous enough to have me on the show. You responded super promptly. We got on. We had a great time. And I want to thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thanks for being a guest. I really appreciate it. It was a great show. And again, I'll remind those listeners out there to watch for Michael's show on May 23rd, guest number 1037, Cars Yeah.
What I wanted to do is actually wanted to thank you for something else. Like once we spoke, and this was actually at the time that I was recording your podcast, I started learning a little bit about, what you're doing and how you're doing it. And you actually helped me systemize ways a little bit better with what I'm doing here at Road Story. So I want to thank you for that as well.
Oh, cool. You're welcome.
Yeah. So with that being said, your show's a great one. I listen to it a lot. I'm not going to say I listen to every guest, but, I listen to
it's a lot of guests to listen to.
Yeah, it's a lot of information from a lot of really great people. And, obviously I pick and choose. Some names stick out, some names don't. And, kind of have to do that sometimes. But what I wanted you to do is I wanted you to take the opportunity to actually tell people who don't know about Cars Yeah, where to find you and how to listen to you. So please.
I appreciate that. Well, you'll find over 1,000 shows on the Cars Yeah website. Very easy. Just Cars Yeah, YEAH.com. Every guest on my show gets their own show notes page with links back to their business. So it's a nice marketing tool that they can use if they want to link it to their site to drive people to listen to them so that they could really hear about their passion and enthusiasm for their business and their cars. And of course, you can listen to it on any mobile podcast app, including iTunes, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, and I'm on Spotify. But every guest has their own page where you can listen there as well on the website. So my site is dynamic, so you can listen on a mobile device or on a laptop or desktop computer. And one thing I want to invite all your guests here is they can get something free from me if they go to the website. There's a little red button that flies in called Free Book. If you click on that, I'll send you my free Filler Up book. It's a 30-page book that I designed, and I use my photography. I've got a lot of photography, over 100,000 images in my library. It's crazy over all the years of going to cool shows. And there's over 60 unique, colorful images of fuel fillers. And listeners probably going, what? Gas caps? Well, these aren't just normal car gas caps. These are collector cars, race cars, really, they're works of art is what they really are. Very cool. And then I've kind of laced some very famous automotive enthusiast quotes throughout the book. I'll email that to you and it'll put you on my email list, and from there you're a subscriber. And I do a lot of giveaways. I have a lot of authors on my show. I just gave away Hurley Haywood's new book that Sean Cridlin did with Hurley Haywood, the famous endurance racer for Porsche. I mean, this is a huge, $350 book that I gave away to a listener. Christmas time I give away thousands of dollars worth of stuff, so I would encourage people to go there. And I do a weekly blog, so you get my blog. And I'll just let you know that my blog, the rule with it is you can read it in less than a minute. It's not a long, dry, spelled out kind of thing. It's basically designed around automotive inspiration and business inspiration. So that's how you can find Mark Greene at Cars Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Mark, you've definitely inspired me, so thank you for that. I appreciate it greatly.
Awesome. Great.
The Road Stories podcast is recorded, engineered, and produced by Michael Senderovich. Original music is provided by the Road Stories Project and Clarence. You can find Clarence at soundcloud.com/Clarence Los Angeles. If you like this podcast, please make sure to leave us a review wherever you listen to the show. Also, please make sure to follow us on social media at RS Podcast. Thanks so much for listening.